Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you can be with us today. You know, the whole area of afterlife-related information is so broad and it's so deep that there are many ways we can approach it. And we can live full and fulfilling lives of service and teaching in just a little part of it, or in the whole broad field of it. And sometimes, like me, we just enter this field of afterlife studies because we love it and it fascinates us. But there are some folks, like our guest today, who have had tragedy strike them, and it draws them into studying the afterlife. Brian D. Smith started out as a spiritual seeker. I think he's still that, really. But he grew up in the Pentecostal religious tradition. He became part of an evangelical community. We talked about this. After that, he became a Christian Universalist. He studied Buddhism, he went into mystical traditions, and he says he became pretty deeply scarred by toxic religion. I think a lot of people have, and among other things, it instilled in him a fear of death. But further study helped him to alleviate a lot of that fear, and he was leading a really beautiful life. He has a wonderful wife named Ty, and he had two gorgeous daughters, and then in June of 2015, his younger daughter, Shayna, and she, just a gorgeous, gorgeous young girl. In June of 2015, that beautiful, beautiful young girl was not quite yet 16 years old when she transitioned in her sleep. Now, after Shayna's transition, Brian tells us that his spiritual quest really intensified because of some extraordinary visions and messages he was receiving from his daughter, which of course is what you want to have happen when a child suddenly is out of sight. As a result of those experiences, he immersed himself in researching the afterlife, taking a scientific as well as a spiritual and philosophical approach to it. And he says that now he needed to know. He really needed to know and not just believe what was true about death and the afterlife. And he learned so much that he ended up writing a book. It's entitled Grief to Growth, Planted, Not Buried. Now, I met Brian right around the time that he lost his daughter. Well, she just went out of sight. Yeah. And I was so impressed with him that I was at that time experimenting with perhaps going into being a minister, and I was doing guest ministry at some churches, and I put him in the pulpit. I wanted to see what he would say, and he did a beautiful job there too. And now he and I are just plain friends. Brian is a podcaster, a blogger, and he shares all that he's learning as a teacher and a grief counselor with a wonderful organization helping parents heal. Brian, I'm so happy you're here that I was worried you wouldn't even have enough time to give to me, but here we are. Brian, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you, Roberta. I always have time for you, of course.
Let's talk a little about Shayna, because you have a picture of her there, and she is just a beautiful young girl. Now, she had some kind of because parents are going to look at her and they're going to say, oh my God, and be scared that their daughter, if a beautiful child, is going to just transition in her sleep. But she did have some kind of a condition that you thought she had grown out of by then, right?
Well, she did have a condition, Wolff-Parkinson's White, I believe it was called, or is called. But she had seen a cardiologist, and the cardiologist assured us that her form of it was very mild and that she would live a long time. The last time she'd seen the cardiologist was almost 2 years before. He said, I want to see you like every couple of years. And what would happen is her heart would start to race a little bit for 30 seconds at a time. But she was on no medications, no restrictions. She played basketball. She played volleyball. And I don't mean to scare people, but there is something in children called sudden unexplained death in children, which does happen. And there are known causes. So People always want to look for a cause, and as I said, she did have this condition, but there was some debate between the coroner and the cardiologist as to what would have caused whatever caused her to pass. But I believe it was just her time, and that's what I go with.
But how horrifying. How really horrifying. But you say that you heard from her though.
Oh, we've heard from her a lot. Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, right after, soon after.
Yeah, Shayna is a very was in the body and is out of the body a very prolific communicator. So she's found ways to come through. It's really interesting, Roberta. Yours was one of the first podcasts I discovered this summer that Shayna passed away. She passed away in June, and I was looking for podcasts and I found your podcast. And you generously connected me with a medium that gave me a reading with Shayna that was just amazing. So, I've heard from her through mediums, through signs, through synchronicities, through dream visits, many, many different ways. And it's been, as we're recording this, it'll be 10 years she's passed on June 24th. So just about a month from the day, we're coming up on her 10th angelversary. So it's a really interesting time for me going through this process. And my 64th birthday was yesterday. So there's a lot of reflection going on
Don't
right now.
look your age, my dear one, and not at all.
So yeah, it's a lot of reflection going on, right now. But as I said, Shayna she is a force. She's a force of nature, and I say is because she still is. She's ever a bit as strong now as she was when she was in the body, probably more so.
Well, what kind of thing does she say to you? Does she encourage you to be teaching and doing all the things you're doing? Because you really, I follow your podcasting and your blogging, and you really are very into this and into helping people who have these kinds of events in their lives.
Yeah, well, Shayna, again, she was a leader. It was really interesting. We homeschooled her for the first 8 years of school, and she went to eighth grade. She went to public school, and she jumped right in. And she was a leader in her little community, and she had a group of girls that she kind of, advised, even though she was younger than they were. But they looked to Shayna for advice. So she does encourage me, as I've had readings with mediums, they're always like, Shayna's saying, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And even in that first reading, my grandfather was a minister. I don't know if I mentioned that because we mentioned grew up in the Pentecostal church. My grandfather was the pastor, and his parents were both pastors. So it was something that I grew up, around that. And my grandfather he liked to write and to read. He was very, educated man. So I always had that tradition in my family. So when Shayna, and it's funny because I started blogging back before blogging was really a thing. And I remember Shayna came to me one day and she said, Daddy, I want to have a blog. And I said, okay. So I went and set up a blog for her. And about, 6 weeks later, she came to me. She said, Daddy, I want to take my blog down. I said, why? She said, because nobody's reading it. But she had that inclination. She wanted to put things out. So I feel like what I do is just carry on what Shayna was doing when she was here.
Right, right. Isn't that beautiful? So, but you're working with Helping Parents Heal too, which I think is a beautiful organization. Talk a little bit about what they do.
Yeah, Helping Parents Heal is a tremendous organization that has literally saved thousands of lives. When a parent has a child transition, we don't use the term lose, as you said earlier, because she's not lost and she's not gone. But when the child leaves the body and we're left here, a lot of times parents, they want to follow their child. And some actually do. They take their own lives. What Helping Parents Heal, as the name implied, is we want to help each other to heal from this, to move forward. We very much encourage the connection with our children because we believe they're still with us. They're still guiding us. And it's an organization that it's basically a peer-to-peer support group where we encourage each other. We let each other know what you're feeling is normal, but here's some things you can do to move forward. So I've been part of Helping Parents Heal pretty much since right about the time Shayna passed. I joined the organization, I guess, formally about a year after she passed. And I'm on the board with the organization now. And We are there to help parents go through this most tragic thing, or at least it feels that way when it happens to you.
What are the kinds of things that they do, though? I mean, are they're all over the world, aren't they? I
Yeah,
mean,
it's an international organization. We literally have chapters all over the world. So there are physical locations where people meet. You can go to helpingparentsheal.org and you can find places if there's a meeting near you. Some people like that. We do a lot of things by Zoom and through Facebook. So there's a Facebook group that's primarily how people connect. So you go to the Facebook group and then they'll tell you when the Zoom meetings are. So we'll have meetings. We'll have near-death experiencers that come talk to us. We'll have mediums and speak to us, afterlife experts, grief counselors, advisors, coaches, whatever. So what we do is provide resources for parents, and again provide some amount of guidance. But a lot of it is just the support of being in the presence of other people who understand what you're going through. We've had 3 face-to-face conferences now, and each time it's a love fest. It's like a 5-day thing, and you would think it'd be sad and morose, and it is absolutely the opposite of that. It's very, people feel like they can say what they really feel. They know that people are gonna we're gonna understand. You sit down at a table at lunch with parents, and immediately, right, they're here so we've got something in common. So we talk about our kids. What was your experience? What's my experience been? And I've gone from being on the receiving end of that when I first started going to this, needing all that healing, to now I get to go and I get to pay that forward. So I get to talk to parents and be that example that people were for me. I mean, it's hard for me to believe it's been 10 years, but I remember when I met Elizabeth, the founder of Helping Parents Heal. She was only a few years in, but I could look at her as an example of what I could try to aspire to be. So now I'm hoping to do that for other people.
I remember when they started, I was one of the first speakers at one of their first
Yeah,
meetings, and
yeah,
because I was still doing speaking then.
yeah.
They, I mean, obviously these people many of them still in shock. But there I am standing up there talking about my book, The Fun of Dying, and telling them, your child is in the room with us. Your child is not dead. Your child is even every bit more alive than they ever were before and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They would come up to me afterwards and they would say, oh, do you really believe this? And I know it's true. I know it's hard that you can't hug them now, but you can in a way, and this is how you do it and stuff. And that's the atmosphere that there is at their meetings. And even today, I still get all their emails. They send them out every month, and they're, these are new members, and they've lost their children. Hold them in your hearts, or whatever they say. I don't know, and they are just so supportive of all these people. It's quite lovely. It really is beautiful, and they meet a lot. They meet a lot, and they love a lot, and it's so positive. Everything they do is positive, as opposed to some other groups which also care about people who have lost children. Because there are, it isn't just that they can die in their sleep. That's probably the least common way you can lose a child. But, kids ride bicycles, kids, drive cars.
Yeah.
They're in football accidents. All kinds of things can happen to a child. They can get leukemia, all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And many other sort of organizations or support groups sort of want you to spend forever mourning your child.
Yeah.
The child doesn't want that. The child who has transitioned is alive and even more alive than ever, and they want you to go on with your life, and they know that they'll see you soon, and time doesn't pass for them in the same way, so they know it'll be a minute for them when they see you again, and they just want you to be happy. And so Helping Parents Heal, let's, make you be happy. be happy now. And so and I remember those meetings.
Yeah,
And
you're absolutely right. I remember after Shayna passed, I went to a support meeting with the group around here. And there was a woman there she was probably 10 years in after she had lost her daughter. And she was miserable. She was angry. She was sad. And you could tell at these meetings, people just kept telling their story over and over again.
yes,
And I remember hearing once, I think it was after Native American said, if someone passed, you were only supposed to tell your story like 3 times. Because the thing is, we want to tell our stories. I mean, I love talking about Shayna, but if all you're talking about is her passing over and over again,
yes,
you're just reinforcing the idea that you should be sad, and miserable for the rest of your life. We're like, let's tell our kid's story, but the story continues. It's not over. Your life is not over. As you said, very well, your child wants you to be happy. And I hear people say, well, they would want you to be happy. I'm like, no, they do want you to be happy.
want you to be happy.
It's not would.
Yes, yes, yes. It's quite a different relationship that they foster between you and your child.
Absolutely.
It's a positive relationship they foster between you and your child. They also they'll say, wait, we will have some time afterwards to talk about your child. Bring a picture of your child and we can share the pictures. That sort of thing. Positive. Everything was positive with that group. So I urge anyone listening who has lost a child and they still kind of want to talk about it, Helping Parents Heal. We'll put the contact information in the notes to this program so that you'll be able to easily find it and get in touch with them. They love everybody who has lost a child, no matter when it was, is automatically a member of that group. To just go to the meetings and be a part of the group.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's another thing that you're doing. So, but you have all kinds of interesting, even more interesting than the guests that we have on Seek Reality. Some of the guests you have are kind of far out, and I'm amused to see that. So, who have been some of the interesting far out guests you've had lately on your podcast?
Well, we were talking before we got started recording. I've had a couple people who say they are angels, and I think is very interesting. So I like to ask, okay, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be an angel? Like you were saying, where are your wings? But I like to remain open to possibilities. And I remember one time, this is quite a while ago, I met a woman. I don't think she might be met her name, Becky Alsta Clausen. And she had an experience where her brother, after he transitioned, she saw her brother, in physical form. And so I was talking to Becky, and she said something about like she was on a retreat and she saw fairies. And I'm like, fairies? Really? So I'm like, I remain open to all possibilities at this point.
Yes.
So yes, I've had people I've had people that near-death experiences and said they've experienced a hellish type of experience. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? I want to know, what does that mean? People who are, predicting the future. They're saying this is going to happen. So I don't really try to shy away from any topic because I think a scientific mindset is a mindset that's open. Scientists should examine phenomena and determine whether it's plausible or not. We shouldn't reject it out of hand because we live in this very materialistic society that says what you and I are talking about. Oh, it's not possible. Mediumship is not possible. We know when people die that their brain, our consciousness is generated by our brain. Therefore, when people die, there is no consciousness. And so people cannot continue. That is not a scientific point of view. My background, I'm an engineer. So I've got this scientific, bent to my nature. Now, I'm not a sucker. I don't believe everything that everybody says. But I want to examine it. And as I've examined a lot of this is absolutely true. And there are all these different, I'll call them pillars of evidence that add up, near-death experiences, mediumship, shared death experiences, afterlife communications, all these things, and what's consciousness, we're finding out about consciousness now, quantum physics. So when you add all these things together, the evidence is overwhelming. And you being a lawyer, you understand this, when we go to a court of law, we don't have to prove things beyond, to a logical certainty. We have to prove
Right.
things beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
And I always contend if I had to make a case for the afterlife in front of a jury, there would be no reasonable doubt that the afterlife exists.
Yeah. Well, you could certainly prove it. Right.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, so like you were saying, me being adventurous with my guests, I'm like, I want to show there's a whole spectrum. There is a greater reality than a lot of us realize. And it's phenomenal. It's amazing to me. I'm just still astounded, and I don't understand how it all works, but I know that it does.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've spent my life studying it, of course. I understand pretty well how it works. And
Yeah.
when you know it for really such a certainty, such a pretty confident certainty,
Yeah.
makes your life joyous. I mean, you know absolutely that you're going to hug Shayna again. There's no doubt in your mind. And so you can happily look at her picture and just feel joyous about it. It's sad you can't hug her this minute,
Yeah.
but it's going to be very soon. And you know that it'll be soon.
Yeah. And
Well, you know that your life is eternal. What a joyous feeling every morning to get up knowing, well, one day closer. I have friends who are certain about the afterlife, and they do get up every morning saying one day closer.
that's what I say. When after Shayna passed, it was about a week after she passed, I started a blog, and I would do pretty much daily entries at that time. And I started day one. I called it day one. And I'm up to day 300, 3,000, whatever I am now, 624 or something.
Right.
We're coming up on, like I said, we're coming up on 10 years. And when I first started that numbering system, I thought of it as like a jail sentence. I'm like, I'm in prison now because I don't have my daughter and I'm
Yeah.
trapped here. And I don't look at it that way anymore, but I do get up every day and I do say one day closer. And some people might find that morbid, but it's the opposite of morbid. It's like Shayna loved Christmas.
Yes,
Shayna would look forward,
when you said Christmas, that was the same word that was in my head.
yeah.
Exactly.
So
You're looking
just
forward
like when
to
you're a
a
little
beautiful
kid,
day.
yeah, you're a little kid, you look forward to Christmas, and you're literally counting the days down to Christmas. I know that death is not the end; it's just the end of this physical body, which is going to wear out, is wearing out. So there's this, as I go through, like I said, I just turned 64 a couple of days ago, and I'll talk to my friends who are all about my age, and they'll say, "Oh no, we're still young, and I'm like, "No, we're aging, and that's fine because that's the way this body was designed to do. It's got
Not supposed to
an
last
expiration date,
forever.
and I don't want it to last forever. I don't want it to last forever because I know what's waiting for me. And so this idea, as you said, we can live joyously, we can live with a lot less fear, because
Yeah.
one of the overwhelming fears that underlies most other fears is the fear of death. It's the fear of mortality. That's what keeps a lot of people really struggling. And once you remove that fear, everything else kind of pales in comparison.
Oh, life goes from being a tragedy to a comedy. It's just so joyous. And I try to help people understand that. You get rid of the fear of death, and there is nothing that you fear. I mean, what could happen? You might die. I
Yeah,
mean, really,
yeah,
nothing bad can happen. Everything is wonderful. I mean, I feel I've had I guess a year ago now, just about. I had a stent put in my heart. I didn't understand. I was starting to feel kind of old a little bit, and it
hmm
turned out I needed a little kind of tiny piece of metal or plastic or something they put in my heart, and
hmm
suddenly I was 40 years old again.
hmm
Can you believe something like that could make you 40 years old again?
yeah,
I swear, that's all I am is 40 years old. I have that much energy and that much enthusiasm and that much everything. 40,
yeah,
that's all.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I have kids that age and I can beat them at everything.
yeah,
That's to me what life is about. If you stay 40 years old, your body can wear out, but your mind is just just what it always was.
yeah, yeah. And
And
the
dear,
thing,
so are you. I mean, you're probably you look to me as if you haven't aged a day since I met you.
Well, I have. The thing is, as I said, I don't view it as a tragedy. I remember helping Parents Heal, one of those conference. It was one of the first conference. It was the first conference, and someone asked. There was a medium there. She was channeling this entity that she calls Sanaya, and someone asked, "Why us? Why 500 parents in this room? Why us? Why do we have to be the ones to go through this?" That question that we all have when something tragic happens. And what Sanaya said through her was, we don't view this as a tragedy. This is, when you come in, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, it's been 8 years ago, but when you come in, we know you're going to go back. This is the plan. As a software kind of person, because I used to sell computers, this is what we call a feature. It's not a bug. Death is not a
That's
bug.
right. It's
What we
not
call death, it's planned. It's planned obsolescence. These bodies were designed to be here for a while to learn our lessons and then to move on. And so when you look at it that way, as you said, nothing becomes a tragedy. And, it's been almost 10 years since Shana passed, and people will get very, oh, I'm so sorry, that you had to go through this. And I appreciate it. I really do. And it's like I always feel this way, that because I do have my moments, but I'm like, it's not a tragedy. This was Shana only wanted to be here for 15 years. This was Shana's plan. And, would I have wanted her to be here longer? Of course. But that wasn't her plan. She was here she lived full out. She was curious about life. She was adventuresome. She played sports. She did what she wanted to do. And she loved candy. She loved pizza. And I would tell her, Shana, you can't live this way for, 80 years, eating nothing but candy and pizza. But Shana, I think she knew, I'm only going to be here a certain amount of time. I'm going to get all the candy I want.
As much as possible, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is, these lives are not, you're right, these lives are very short and they're designed to be short. They
Yeah.
feel longish until you start looking back at them and you say, wow, that didn't last long.
Yeah.
It really didn't. But on the other hand, what comes after it is so glorious,
Yeah.
so much better than we're living now. People just don't get that. I mean, I try to explain to people this is like who is it that made this analogy? We're actually in this dark cave and looking at a wall.
It was Plato. Yeah.
Is it Plato? See,
Yeah.
you're always smarter than I am. Stop showing off.
Yeah.
But but truly, that's all it is. And when we finally get out of the cave and we're looking around at the bright blue sky and all the flowers, that's what it's going to be like after we have shed these bodies and we can get out of this cave.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And it's really interesting you brought up Plato, because I was talking to somebody. Right now, we have a lot of physicists saying they're using simulations theory. They're saying, okay, we're not living in reality. We're living in a simulation,
Yes.
and so the analogy we use now, because it's the technology we have, is computer games. So the mistake is people take these analogies to be literal. Plato wrote about caves because there were no computers then.
That's all he had, yes.
So he used what he had. But the thing is, just like Seek Reality, we're living in a shadow, basically. And the Bible talks about this. That says that God, has prepared these things for that no ear has heard, no eye has seen. This is
But
beyond your
God has ready
understanding.
for those who love him,
Right.
actually for all of us.
And well, for all of us, exactly. But near-death experiencers tell us the same thing. So I was talking to someone the other day, and I just got this image of life is like a hallway. You're walking in this hallway, and there are these doors off to the side, and you go in the door, and you come back out. You get married, you have a job, you get divorced, whatever. You're going in and out of these doors. But at the end of the hallway, there's this big door that's called death.
Yes.
And we're all going toward that door. Now, if you have no idea what's beyond that door, it's probably going to be scary to you. But we know people that have gone beyond the door and they've come back, and they're like, I'm telling you, it's not bad. We've got religions that tell us it's a good thing. There is something beyond that. The more you know about that, the less you're going to fear it. And that's what I feel like I've had, even though I haven't had a near-death experience myself, I've had a peek beyond that door. And I get to do that every day, through talking to people like you. And so I don't fear that. I think I have almost the same lack of fear of death as someone who's had a near-death experience. And almost universally, if you talk to someone who has a near-death experience, you can ask them anything, but one question they all say is, I don't fear death anymore.
Oh, no. No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, it's the most glorious. And the thing is, the very atmosphere is love.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have no sense of what it's like to just be bathed in love, and there's nothing but love. To live in love,
Yeah.
no, nothing but love is so amazing. Because here, the atmosphere is, gee, what a nice day. But to know that we are loved and nothing but loved,
Hmm.
oh, dear one, it's just the most glorious feeling. I had an experience of light when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
Thinking about it again because I just wrote about it, and that never goes away. It's much more rare than a near-death experience. Very few people have ever had them,
Hmm.
but you never forget that. And then you you really know that you're loved. Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Shayna is very proud of you. I mean, look what my dad is doing. He's teaching everybody this stuff now. I mean, you write about it, you teach it, you help people to live the truth that she's teaching you. It's such a beautiful thing that you're doing, my dear one. So beautiful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And as you were talking about love, and the thing is, I talk about my toxic religious background, but there's a lot of good stuff I got too. And I remember being in Sunday school, and they were talking about, like, there's a God-shaped hole in your heart. There's a hole that only God can fill.
That's
Now they
right.
meant that in the big white guy on the throne, but it's actually true. The one thing that we all seek is that
Jesus
connection.
was not white.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You're aware of that, right?
I'm well aware of that. Yeah,
Okay.
but there's this thing that we seek. So everything else is a substitute. Everything else that we seek is a substitute for that, and that's fine because in this world we're here to have fun and have adventures and have a nice day and enjoy the ice cream and all that stuff. But
It's
it
great.
really all pales in comparison to that feeling of unconditional love that people describe when they've had that experience, like the experience of light, or they've had an NDE, and that's all they want, right? And they'll say
Oh, yeah.
they're angry when you bring them back. You bring them back, and the first thing they do when they open their eyes is like, "Why did you bring me back?" So that's what we have to look forward to. So why would I fear that? And I think if you truly know that, and it was funny because you mentioned Christian universalism, and because I was a Christian, and we were taught that most of the world was going to hell, and that was all their fault, and blah blah blah. But I read a book by a guy named Thomas Talbot. It was called the Inescapable Love of God,
Yep.
and one of the arguments he made was no one in their right mind who is fully informed would reject what we're calling God. Because you couldn't. It's inescapable. You could not turn away from that. So if you're not desiring that, it's because you either are not in your right mind or you don't understand, what God truly is. So I believe that yes, I think the Calvinists were right about God saves who he chooses to save, if you want to use that word, but that's everybody because God loves
There
everybody.
is no hell, by the
Right.
way. There is no such thing as hell. No one has ever been able to find a hell. And Jesus didn't talk about a hell. He talked about Gehenna, which turns out is a garbage pit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he did talk about the uh, the. Now I'm getting old enough now that I remember. I can't remember terms. He's talked about the outer darkness where there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. That does exist. That's the lowest level of the afterlife, and it's the place where we can put ourselves if we don't love. But we get out of it. It's not hell. It's not, it's just cold, dark, smelly, and disgusting. And we know exactly what it is and how we put ourselves there. God does not ever put anybody there, but we can put ourselves there just by not being loving.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Jesus. because there's a guy I follow, or he's Swedenborg, Emmanuel Swedenborg. I'm sure you've
Yes,
heard
of
of.
course, big time.
So I was listening to something about Swedenborg the other day, and the thing is, Jesus, we know, spoke in parables.
Yes,
And Jesus said that I'm speaking in parables, right? So we take a lot of these parables and we make them literal, like the parable of the pearl of greatest price, or the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. These are parables. And Jesus told us very clearly the kingdom of heaven is within. So a lot of what we interpret is Jesus saying literally there's going to be a separation of sheep and goats, and there's going to be this and that. He was talking about an internal state.
hmm
So even what we call, these things where we think, oh, that meant there's actually hell. No, he's talking about internal states. He's talking about what's going on in your heart, that
that's
you've
right.
got to separate the lies from the truth.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
I do agree with you. I think there is a state that we can put ourselves in that says I'm not worthy or I'm guilty or whatever, and we can choose to be in that state for a while, but we're never left in that state. And even in the most, and that's why I like to interview people who have had these hellish near-death experiences. I met Howard Storm because he talked about a hellish type experience, but I'm like, okay, clearly it wasn't eternal because you're not still there.
No,
And
in fact, those hellish near-death experiences are number one. All near-death experiences are individual and created by our own guides for our own education. Number
mhm,
one, they're not objectively real.
right.
And if they feel you need to be in that experience, you'll have that experience. All you have to think is, I want to be out of this, and you're out of it.
Yeah. I noticed that because I interviewed, I didn't interview Howard Stern, but I have met him. I interviewed a Dr. Raj Party who had an experience, and he was in kind of this hellish state. And I
Mhm.
remember listening to a woman, I wasn't on my interview, but she was like, oh, I was in this state and I was falling and I knew I was going to fall for eternity. And I remember as I was listening to it, I thought, well, you didn't fall for eternity because you're sitting here telling the
Yeah,
story.
right. Yeah,
So
right.
there is,
Exactly.
as you said, there's zero evidence, zero of any eternal state like
No, no,
that.
no, there's no, any
And
kind
it,
of eternal negative experience.
right,
Absolutely
right,
right.
yeah. So that I take assurance in that because when I was a child, I was taught this is eternal, this is it. If you close your eyes and you're not right with God, you're going to be punished forever, which is just the most ridiculous thing that anybody could ever make
But
up.
God insists that we learn to forgive.
Yeah, exactly.
God would insist that we learn to forgive, but He doesn't have to forgive.
Right.
God,
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I ask people, are you better than God? Do you have more mercy than God does?
mm-mm.
Yeah.
No, God is infinitely loving and infinitely forgiving. Of course,
Hmm.
of course, of course.
So yeah, I do. And as interesting as I said, I always think about my grandfather because he was a giant in my life. And, I want to alleviate fear as much as possible. I want to alleviate confusion as much as possible. I want to spread the good news, which is, I believe this is the good news, is that you can't fail. You can temporarily screw up. This is what you're here to do. You're here to make mistakes.
Prepare
You
to
know,
make mistakes. Exactly
yeah,
right.
you're
That's your
you're
job.
you're here to make mistakes. And I
To
love the
learn from
analogy of
them.
toddlers. If a toddler is learning to walk and they're falling down, we don't get angry at the toddler because they're falling. It's like that's part of the process of learning to walk. And when we come here, we're learning. We're learning to love it. We're learning. We're learning to improve ourselves, and we're put in a very tough environment. This is a hard place to be. So
So
people
places,
should be proud of whatever progress you make while you're here. And I know, again, so you talked about Shayna. Yeah, I want to make her proud. Shayna's going to be a hard grader. I know Shayna.
no,
She would
Shayna is busting her buttons,
she
my
would cut you quick with her tongue. So I'm like, okay, I need to live up to what standard I know she's
oh
going to
my
hold me to.
darling. She's so proud of you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure of that. Looking at how hard you work. I'm proud of you too. I feel as if I kind of discovered you and I had no idea you were going to make this your whole life, Your life's worth
You're a big part of where I am. Like I said, after she passed, I was like, okay, what do I do? I don't think I'd ever even listened to a podcast before, and I found your podcast, and I found Sandra Champlain's podcast. I listened to every episode,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I saw what you were doing, and I'm like, I want to help people like that. I want to present the reality to people. I'm not here to proselytize. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I just want to alleviate the fear that I know people have.
Yeah.
And it was just talking to someone earlier today that, just lost his son tragically and was like, well, how do I make sense out of God? How do I make sense out of religion? How do I make sense of all the stuff I've been told? And, people have these questions. Am I a bad person? Am I being punished? All these terrible thoughts that some religion puts into people's minds. And you don't have to suffer through that.
I used to fret about how God saw sin, how all of that. And I asked my spirit guide, uh, how does God really see sin? This was years ago, and I had young children, and he put this vision into my mind of my living room when I had very young children, and my little son running around who just had learned to walk.
Mm.
And God is sitting on my sofa, God, the God from the Sistine Chapel, long beard,
Hmm.
that God. And my little son is running around with an orange juice cup full of orange juice. And you know what's going to happen. He's going to
Yeah.
damn orange juice. And then he does. And he drops the orange juice all over the place. You've got orange juice, and he drops down on his diaper, and he's crying, and God's laughing, and he
Hmm.
picks up the baby, and he's cuddling the baby. And my spirit guide said, that's how God sees sin.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah,
I
exactly.
never forgot that.
I love that. I love that. And we do get some hints of that in the Bible, right? We get the parable of the
Yes,
prodigal
yes,
son,
that's the whole point.
and I tell people like, I love what Thomas Jefferson is one of my forefathers. And it's really interesting because
Oh, really? Are you descended from Thomas Jefferson?
yeah, yeah.
Really? Oh, I love that.
So he
Oh,
created the what they call the Jeffersonian Bible, because he's like a bunch of this stuff. He called it the diamonds and the dung. He's like, there's diamonds in the Bible and there's dung. So there's parts of the Bible you just need to just cut them out with the razor. Just like,
oh
no.
yeah. Oh no, he made the Jefferson Bible. Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, he said,
Study
nope,
Bible.
but I think the prodigal son is a great story. And there's some really brilliant details in that story, because the son, says, I'm going to go back to my father's house and just be a servant, because, it's better than where I am now.
Yeah.
And the father, it says the father saw him a long way off, and the father ran to him. Well, rich men in those times, they did not run. They would never be caught running, because it's not dignified. So the father didn't wait for the son to come, and the son didn't even say anything. The son never said, I'm sorry. The father just like took him back in.
Yeah.
That's a true image of God.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And the brother was outraged. But I've
Yes.
been here. I've been serving you my whole life, and the father said, yes, and yes, and as you know, half of everything I own is yours. But this, my son, who was lost to us, is found. He's back.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, that's how God would see all of the lost children. Oh, they're all, of course, God forgives us for all of our sins. That's, I don't know why I ever thought that the other was even a possibility that God would blame us for our sins. We make mistakes. If we weren't trying, we wouldn't make mistakes. If that baby were not trying to learn to walk, it wouldn't spill the orange juice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is what tortured me when I was a child, because this is what they told me, right? I'm like, you're telling me that I was born with a sinful nature because of Adam. So because Adam messed up, I'm born with a sinful nature, and I'm doomed before I even start.
Yeah.
I'm quote in sin the moment I'm born. I just it never made sense to me, but I accepted it for about
No,
25, 30 years.
no, no. God loves us so perfectly. Each one of us is God's best beloved child,
Yeah. Yeah.
very best. You are God's best beloved child,
Yeah.
each one of us. And as A Course in Miracles says, in truth, there's only one of us here, and that one is God's best beloved child.
Yeah. That's a concept that, I didn't hear until I was, wow, in my 40s probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was when I started going to the Unity Church.
Yes, that's unity is big on A Course in Miracles.
Yeah. So these are the things that, we're taught. I was taught the opposite of when I was a child, that
Yeah.
God despises you. He despises your sin.
Yeah.
And that only because of Jesus' blood are you even allowed in God, in God's sight, because he can't stand it.
I asked God, is all of that true? I asked Jesus, is that true? Did you really die for our sins? Because it didn't make sense to me that God would be loving and would require that of his own child.
Right.
He couldn't forgive us without that. And Jesus said, of course not. Jesus said he died on the cross so that he could rise from the dead and prove to us that our lives are eternal. That was
Yeah.
why he died on the cross.
Yeah. Yeah, actually we were talking about Substack earlier. I wrote an article about that, that idea that Jesus died for our sins. And there's many different theories of atonement, which I didn't know. I wasn't taught that either. We were only taught one, the penal substitutionary atonement theory.
Yeah, right.
That God had to kill Jesus instead of killing us, which doesn't make any sense.
It does.
It makes zero sense. But as you said, God forgives us, and even to the point where if you have perfect understanding, then forgiveness isn't necessary. And because there's no, and I think, of course, the Miracles even talks about that. There is no offense. And again, going back to that toddler thing, if a toddler falls down, you don't forgive the toddler for falling down. You don't have to forgive him. You just pick him up.
Yes. Oh, my dear, we have gone so over our time. I could talk to you all day long.
Yeah.
What do you want people to take away from our conversation today?
I want people to take away that, as you say, it's all good news, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Whether you're a materialist and you're stuck in that fundamentalism, or you're stuck in religious fundamentalism, just explore. Just ask questions, and there's a whole bunch of evidence out there. If people want to follow me, I'm at Grief to Growth, grief numeral 2 growth. So grieftogrowth.com. That's the podcast.
This is going to be in the notes. So don't drive off the road. You don't have to write it down.
Yeah. So if you want to follow me, this is the message that I try to get out to people, and to help people that have gone through either a materialist mindset or that, like I said, that fundamentalist, whatever your religion might happen to be. It's okay to let that go.
But if you've lost someone very close to you, terrific to follow Brian, because Brian D. Smith, he really, he understands, and he is someone who really is able to help people who have lost someone or think they have, when they're to make their life feel as if it's worth going on and living. Because you lose no one. Life is richer in some ways as you look forward to that wonderful reunion that is going to come very soon, very, very soon. And just stay there. I've got to just tell everybody about next week. Next week we're going to meet some ghosts, which is going to be kind of, see, I'm broadening. You're broadening my outlook, my dear darling friend. Anyway, I will be right back. Oh, that was a lot of fun. And he is at grieftogrowth.com, but that will also be in the notes. Oh, my dear friends, this was fun. But we've come to the end of our time. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so happy you were with us today. Please never forget, you are a powerful, eternal being by your very nature. You never began, you never will end. And when you get that, when you really get it, it changes everything in your life for the better. And next week we'll be talking with, I promise this, Allie Crawford. She's going to talk about her very surprising new book called Heaven Help Us. Here on Seek Reality, we generally never have talked about this stuff before because spirituality is a beautiful and positive thing, but there can be negative things about it too. I promise you that's true. And we can fight them successfully because they're out there. There is a darker side. I have just started to read her book, and it's going to surprise you, I promise you. But it does have a happy ending, so please be sure to join us next week. And today we've been talking with our truly beautiful friend, Brian D. Smith. He's been with us for the third, but certainly not the final time. I first met Brian a decade ago when he had just lost his gorgeous young daughter, Shayna. She transitioned in her sleep at not quite 16, but I was so impressed with him that I invited him to speak at a Unity church, and he has been making a beautiful career for himself, helping people who have lost someone to basically find themselves. I don't know how else to put it. He does blogging, he's a podcaster, he works through helping parents heal, and I know Shayna is busting her buttons, proud of her dad. He is somebody extraordinary. And frankly, we've run completely out of time. All I can do is tell you now that this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy, please make the most of this coming week in our beautiful one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you most of all in this entire gorgeous, beautiful, perfect universe. You are infinitely, eternally, and perfectly loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.